A valiant effort from the Raptors. No Brandon Ingram, Scottie Barnes, or Jakob Poeltl. They pushed the Celtics, dunked on them, but it wasn't enough. Let's go to the film room.
The only thing that's originally filmed is that and I've studied older films and tried to figure out how I got that impression. I was getting amazed when in the cutting room.
The unique thing about film is an art form
exactly.
is the editing.
So no Scottie Barnes, no Brandon Ingram, no Jakob Poeltl. That meant a lot of opportunity for some of the end-of-bench guys and two-way guys for the Toronto Raptors. And the guy I'm most confident in after watching the 905 a bunch this season is Alijah Martin. I believe Alijah will be a rotation player on this Raptors team at the very least next season. And I just think he brings all of the intuitive things that the Raptors want from that position, specifically as a role player. So defensively, that's his calling card. And I loved how he guarded Jaylen Brown in this game in the possessions that he had. Here he is, top blocking it, making it difficult for him to catch this ball. He fights through this screen. And even when Brown gets it in the post, he's in his chest, being strong, and then also using his hands, physicality to deflect and block that shot. So that is what Alijah Martin brings as a defender pretty consistently. Offensively, he can do a little bit of everything. His main thing is knocking down threes, and he was just 1 of 5 tonight. I thought he had a lot of good looks. Those will fall with repetition and with comfortability in the Raptors' offense. But he also can put the ball down on the floor and make some rudimentary reads, which will be important in the Raptors' offensive system. Here, nice little crossover, and then gets downhill, attracts the help, and a beautiful kick out to Jamal Shead, who knocks down the three. Going back to the defensive end and his two-way utility, this is him perfectly executing a peel switch. So he bites on this Jaylen Brown pump fake, and Jamal Shead steps up on this, right? That is what this Raptors defense is predicated on. I recommend you guys go and read Samson Folk's latest piece on Raptors Republic. What Alijah Martin now needs to do is peel switch to the corner here, because Jamal Shead, who was supposed to be guarding the corner guy, is now guarding and picking up Jaylen Brown. And so that's exactly what he does. Sprints to the corner, forces Hugo Gonzalez to pick up this ball, and a good contest and a miss from Hugo. That is a perfectly executed peel switch by Alijah Martin. Yeah, this is what I mean by can make rudimentary reads. Still needs to get his handle right, truthfully. I think that's the next step for him as a player is getting his handle to a functional level. This time relocates off of a kick out and then just settles into a three, knocking down the above the break three. He's a pretty good transition finisher too, does this a lot for the Raptors 905 here, barrels through traffic and finishes with the left. And of course, how could I not talk about his unbelievable athleticism? This is also something he does for the 905 regularly. Don't jump with Alijah Martin. He will dunk on you. Very, very good athlete, especially in the open floor. And so, folks, that was Alijah Martin. And if you look at the box score as the Raptors lose this game 125-117, a lot closer than I imagined it would be with no Scottie Barnes, no Brandon Ingram, and no Jakob Poeltl against a Celtics team that is playing some really good basketball. A Celtics team that shot 50% from three tonight. Shot 54% from the field. Defense was, truthfully, optional from the Raptors' perspective. Not a lot of good defense tonight from the Raptors, other than their bench group. If you'll remember, in Summer League, those guys were absolute dogs. If you think of Jonathan Mobo and, of course, Alijah Martin and A.J. Lawson and Jamal Shead, those guys, Jameson Battle, Colin Murray-Boyles, they created this atmosphere of, hey, we're going to pressure, we're going to force turnovers, et cetera, and that didn't necessarily translate to the Raptors roster. I think they had to dial back some of that pressure. Again, I would suggest you guys go and read Samson Folk's latest piece on defense. I thought he did a good job of illustrating how the Raptors have changed their defensive scheme over the course of the year to adjust to their personnel. That being said, the guys who played tonight from that bench unit can absolutely adhere to the scheme that the Raptors initially wanted to achieve to start the season. They pressure the hell out of the ball. They force turnovers. They do a great job of rotating and recovering and kind of picking and kind of jumping into the gaps for other guys. It's really, really fun to watch those guys play defense. Of course, the offensive side of the ball is where they lack. And so ultimately, you kind of have to pick and choose how to work those guys into the rotation. But focusing in on Alijah Martin here, I really am impressed with him. Just watching him in the 905. And folks, if you don't know, I am the in-arena host for the Raptors 905. So I am privy to basically all of their home games. I watched their what they have is called the Showcase Tournament. It's basically their in-season cup. And I watched all of their games through there. Watching him score so effortlessly, I can't speak for some reason today. Effortlessly, he was shooting the ball, the lights out. He's able to knock down threes at a consistent level. And of course, all of the things that I just detailed to you about what Alijah Martin can do and what he showed against the Celtics, whether it is being this tough defender at the point of attack, forcing turnovers, getting out and running, being a successful transition finisher, shooting the ball, all of these things is something that I believe Alijah Martin can bring at the NBA level. I truthfully believe that he's going to be a rotation player for the Toronto Raptors. And that's interesting because, you know, if you think about him, the Raptors have a lot of players in that archetype, right? You talk about Ochai Agbaji and Grady Dick and Jamison Battle and Jakob Poeltl, who also had a really good game tonight. They have a lot of guys in that wing role player type of role. And I mean, him developing and Jamison Battle needing to play, because I think Battle provides a lot for this Raptors team as well, makes it almost a foregone conclusion that Ochai Agbaji is eventually going to get traded from this team. Ochai was a DMP coach's decision tonight. I think part of that was, you know, Darko Rajakovic even said it in the postgame. It was to give other guys more opportunity. It was to give the Alijah Martins of the world and the Jamison Battles and AJ Lawsons of the world more run and more of a window to kind of get their rhythm throughout a game. You know, he hasn't been shy in like dialing back and scaling up Ochai's minutes. He'll start for a couple games and then he'll scale him back and he'll play 7 minutes or he won't play. And so it's been a pretty inconsistent role for Ochai this season. But that being said, it's also been a strugglesome season for Ochai Agbaji. I don't think anybody can question that. He's shooting, I don't remember what it is right now, but last time I checked, Ochai Agbaji is shooting like 12% from three. So it's been tough for him. That being said, I think Alijah Martin will step into the Raptors rotation at some point over the next, honestly, calendar year. That's what I would say. I think by next year training camp, we're talking about Alijah Martin as a guy who's on the main roster for this Raptors team. And that's just how much confidence I have in his ability for all of the skills that he has at the G League level to translate to what he provides with the Toronto Raptors. Folks, it was a fun game. I know it kind of doesn't sound like a fun game because the Raptors lost and obviously none of the top guys. And oh, by the way, spoiler alert, RJ Barrett hurt his ankle in the second half of this game. Probably should have led with that, but RJ rolled his left ankle in this game. It was scary because it looked like it might have been him re-aggravating his knee. On a replay, you can see that it was actually his ankle. The good news is that he walked away and walked to the locker room on his own volition. He was limping off a little bit. X-rays are negative, according to Darko Rajakovic. And truthfully, with ankles, it's one of those things where you got to see how bad the swelling is the next day, how bad the pain is the next day. And then you can kind of start physio almost immediately on an ankle if it's not broken, if no ligaments are torn, etc., etc. The only reason I know so much about ankles is because, as my friends make fun of me, I have had a lot of ankle injuries in my life. And yeah, unfortunately, it sucks. The ankle injuries are not fun. It's just a part of basketball. It is definitely a part of basketball. It's one of the most common injuries in hoops, and RJ Barrett suffered it. Now, ultimately, I think he has missed a major injury here. It doesn't seem like it's something that's going to have him out for an extended period. But the Raptors are also entering a window which is very interesting because they're heading into a West Coast road trip. They're heading into two very important games against the Sixers in terms of standing. You know, that 4 to 8 range in the Eastern Conference is kind of packed with teams only separated by half a game or a game. And so these next two games against the Sixers are essential They will need Scottie Barnes. They will need Brandon Ingram. They will need RJ Barrett. They will need Jakob Poeltl. And I'm very curious because Jakob seems like he's close. Seems like he, over the next week, maybe perhaps against the Sixers, will be able to play. We'll see. It seemed like Brandon Ingram will be okay to play on Sunday just because from what Daniel Michaud said during the game, he was going to come back against Charlotte, opted against it, and they decided to rest him one more day today. With Scottie Barnes, he went from questionable to doubtful for this game, so I'm curious about what his status is heading into Sunday's game against the Sixers. But nonetheless, you're heading into a stretch with some important basketball. Truthfully, a stretch where it could kind of determine your standing in the Eastern Conference heading into the second half of the year. Health will be a very important part to that. I want to talk about one specific thing. And, at this point in the video, people have usually tuned out. They've got their recap. Raptors lost this game, but it was a valiant effort. And the bench was awesome. And Jakob Poeltl was banging threes. He knocked down 5 of his 9. Jamal Shed jumped in and did some good stuff shooting-wise. Overall, that bench group really locked in defensively. I should mention Grady Dick was part of that bench group who locked in defensively. Grady was excellent on D tonight. He knocked down a couple of his shots, made 1 3. But overall, another game, truthfully, where I'm impressed with what Grady's doing. Has to keep it up. These are the kind of consistent efforts that you need on a night-to-night basis. He was kind of invisible against Charlotte. Tonight, he was good. Got to see those consistent games happen because I thought he had a really good game a couple nights before that. So the thing I want to talk about tonight for the people, maybe this is like a bonus episode, if you will. Immanuel Quickley and his playmaking. Now, if you listen to the latest Pull-Up Trey episode, Samson and Trey talked about advantage assists and the different diet of assists that Immanuel Quickley is cooking up. This is something we all talk about, but all three of us, and we've discussed it ad nauseum before. But overall, IQ had a season-high 13 assists tonight. Some of those were advantage assists. Some of those were not advantage assists. And I think overall it was a good playmaking game. Of course, you get to 13 assists, it ends up being a good playmaking game. But there are clear limitations in terms of the type of playmaker that he is. There are also things that he is clearly working on and improving on. And I just want to detail all of those things because I think it's a good way to talk about IQ in a fair context where you see the areas where he's taking a step forward, see the areas where he's limited, and hopefully we come away with some positive feedback, folks. All right, let's talk about Immanuel Quickley and his playmaking. Okay, so let's start with the bad, or the stuff that I think limits IQ as a playmaker. The Raptors are running a staggered screen situation for IQ. This is one of the most advantageous places for IQ to work, and this is something the Hawks use commonly for Trae Young because it creates a lot of playmaking options. So CMB can roll to the basket here. That's one option. RJ Barrett can pop out here. That's another option. RJ can actually roll to the basket. That's one option. CMB can pop out here. That's another option. And also, the other option is IQ creates himself an open 3. So there's just a lot of different scenarios for the defense to work with. What I think this play requires more than anything is quick decision-making. And so as we see here, the Celtics botch this coverage, or because of Immanuel Quickley's elite pull-up shooting ability, something that he is so good at as a scorer, they send 2 to the ball comfortably. And so as they send 2 to the ball, Derek White tags in here, right? And if you notice, like in this moment, this is a pass right here. When it's about to be Sam Hauser recovering, this is a pass that needs to be made to Colin Murray-Boyles as the roller. Luka Garza is out of position. The staggered screens have done their job. But unfortunately, IQ picks up his dribble and isn't able to make this read. Part of this is height, like IQ can't pass it over Sam Hauser. But also it's just a limitation of quickness and speed. And so they actually go through the third option, which is Jakob Poeltl on the weak side, and he shoots the 3. But see, when he does hit the roller, good things happen. So as we see here, once again, 2 to the ball. And that happens because they want to get the ball out of Immanuel Quickley's hands. Nice bounce pass. CMB in the short roll. Hits Jakob Poeltl, who knocks down the 3. This is also one of those limitations, not being able to pass with your non-dominant hand. And so, as you see here, AJ Lawson is wide open, shaking to the corner, and Quick tries to manipulate the read. Does a good job of doing so by making the weak side or the help defender in Derek White try to split the difference between CMB and Jakob Poeltl here on the opposite corner. But now this has to be a left-handed push pass, right? It has to be a left-handed chest pass where with his left hand he's able to find AJ in this corner here. But instead, it is a two-handed pass. And that just goes to show you the limitation. Look, it's an open shot. It still works. It's a fine pass, but it's just one of those limitations that I'm trying to highlight here. And look, there's moments where he does make the read. So here in the pick and roll, nice jump pass, finds CMB, and he gets fouled. But this is what I mean by being able to pass with your non-dominant hand. So a pick and roll here, and Sam Hauser tags the roller in Mamu, right? And that's going to create an opening for Jakob Poeltl here on the weak side. And so as IQ drives this basketball, this should be a left-handed pass, right, to that weak side corner to Jakob Poeltl. But instead, it's a jump pass with two hands to Jakobi, and it's a contested three. And look, not all assists are created equal. He had 13, but a lot of them were like this, which is, a flare screen and open shot for Jakob Poeltl. Or, he drives to the basket, draws two, kicks it out to RJ Barrett for three. He's not really creating an advantage there. He's just being the playmaker. Anybody on the team could have done something like that, But again, there are moments where he does make the good read. So here in the pick and roll, pseudo transition, does a beautiful job of finding CMB on this lob. And I talked about this on Twitter, but that was the fourth time he's connected on a pick and roll lob this season. Couple times with Scottie, couple times with CMB. I would like to see more of that because that's a read that he's added to his bag this season. Another good read here. So little blind pig action from the Raptors where they run a dribble handoff and immediately they flow into a pick and roll. Nice bounce pass to CMB who finishes in traffic. There's another one, pick and roll high up the floor to get IQ downhill and watch exactly the same thing as I mentioned here with his dominant hand, right? So Sam Hauser now tags the roller. He's pinching in here. And what will happen is he can find RJ Barrett in that weak side corner, knocks down the three. And so that is the difference between, the advantageous assists that IQ can make on any given night and some of the limitations that he has as a playmaker. That doesn't mean that he can never get better at these certain things or that he won't develop these things. I remember, for a very long time, there was a lot of talk about like the limitations of Fred VanVleet as a playmaker. And because of Fred's size, obviously the Raptors for a long time before they traded for Jakob Poeltl didn't have like a center for Fred to run any sort of pick and roll actions with. And so, the personnel around Fred didn't allow him to shine in his playmaking ability. And by the way, that applies to Immanuel Quickley. I should mention that the lack of Jakob Poeltl, the lack of screening ability of Jakob Poeltl, really hinders IQ's playmaking ability too, because Yak is such a good screen setter that he allows Quick an extra second or two to process the floor and make reads. And so, yeah, that's a huge part of this is like personnel and Yak being available. Yak makes Immanuel Quickley a better basketball player. And so that aspect there's no question about that. Like he brings out all the elite qualities of Immanuel Quickley as a hooper, and it makes it really fun to watch. Of course, there are limitations to every player. Every basketball player has that. Scottie Barnes has limitations. RJ Barrett has limitations. Brandon Ingram has limitations. Basically, every player on this roster and almost every player in the NBA has their limitations. Say for, I don't know, man, like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, hard to find some limitations, although there are. Yeah, I'm sure if I could nitpick, I would find some. There are guys who have very little limitations, or at the very least, their limitations aren't heightened by certain aspects of their game, whether it's their height or speed or focus or, truthfully, personnel and roster. Like a lot of those things matter, right? And context matters. I'm trying to put the playmaking aspect of Immanuel Quickley's game in context because I think Quick had a really good offensive game, shot the ball well. Really did a good job of manipulating the defense with his shooting ability, knocked down a couple shots off the ball. which is always a great sign. And I'm hoping that like this plus the Hornets game is sort of like building towards a more fine-tuned version of his game. Of course, again, bringing Jakob back will eventually help him a lot too. But this is all a process. And back to the Fred VanVleet point, Fred is now a very good playmaker. You know, he's the trusty guard on a Houston Rockets team for the last 2 seasons that, you know, bread and butter stuff was pick and roll between him and Şengün, or him and Amen Thompson, and him and Jabari Smith Jr. Like, Fred did such a good job of becoming a pick and roll playmaker. I think Emmanuel quickly can eventually get there, hopefully. But there are some certain things that obviously have to become better. And that's just part of the process, man. That's why Darko Rajakovic consistently says 1% better each day. It's about like adding little by little to your own individual game and hoping that it comes back to the collective. I think that applies to a lot of the players, and it certainly applies to Emmanuel quickly. I just thought the playmaking aspect was something that I noticed tonight. Some good, some bad, some great. And, you know, we'll see how that develops as the season moves along. As I mentioned, a pretty interesting stretch for the Toronto Raptors moving forward, with the Sixers coming up in back-to-back games, the West Coast road trip coming up as well. I believe they play the Clippers, who are playing good basketball recently. So some interesting competition for the Raptors nonetheless. This is a very important month of basketball. The remaining stretch of January, very essential for this Raptors team as they try to, stay in the playoff hunt. Folks, as always, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, do the things that you guys usually do to make sure Raptors Republic gets out to other people. We appreciate you as always. We'll see you later. Peace.